I knew that was about to blast off. I was just waiting. Hello to everyone, and thank you for being here. We missed you all on Sunday, but we're glad to be home with our church family for sure. We didn't do anything super exciting. We were just kind of staying around. Got to go visit my mom. They would know, you might not. Mountain View, that's where my family comes from. So I got to go see my mom and relatives in Mountain View around Easter, and the Glover Chapel bunch. So they do out the country congregation, Richland, for those who don't know. They do an Easter egg hunt after church every year. And sometimes because of spring break, the way it lines up with school, I take off Easter week. That's not intentional. It just so happens to overlap. And Rowan always wants to go to the same place for Easter, Glover Chapel. She knows the Easter egg hunt that's coming up afterwards. So they cleaned up in a couple of different places with that. No, we had a good time. It's good to be home with our church family for sure. Definitely missed you guys. Love you. There's no place like home. There is no place like Conway Church. You don't have to hear that to know that. But we love you and we appreciate you. We're in Hebrews, the 9th chapter. Please open there if you don't mind. It is a book full of words of encouragement, a book of betters. I say book, it's really a letter. But we've been talking about an Old Testament system even though we're in the New Testament. The law of Moses, the Levitical priesthood, and the Old Testament house of worship. First one, not the temple. There are 3 Jewish temples that are constructed during the biblical era, but we're talking about that which even predates that, the tabernacle, built by the guy Moses, who listens to all the words of God's instruction. He does it exactly the way God wants, according to a pattern. Well, we left off with verse 15 in Hebrews 9, and that was our memory verse last time. If you'll allow me, I want to rewind, since it's been a couple of weeks, maybe at least 2, I think it was. I want to rewind to verse 11, which really kind of starts this section, not because we'll rediscuss everything that's in it, but just to refamiliarize ourselves with what it is that we've been discussing involving the tabernacle. So verse 11, in this letter of betters and words of encouragement, forgiveness is the key thought in Hebrews 9. Verse 11, but Christ came as high priest of the good things to come. Now that doesn't mean that there weren't good things before. We're going to find here in a minute, the good here is used kind of with a comparative in mind. And the comparative of good, comparative form is what? You don't say gooder. Well, some might. We do come from the Ozarks, so. What do you say? Oh, okay. So if you think about it that way, the letter of better in Hebrews, really the base thought behind it is good. It's the good things of Hebrews. But because we're comparing it, it's not the gooder, but the better things. Christ came as high priest of the good things to come with the greater, see, that's a comparative, an ER at the end of the word, and more. That's a comparative because you don't say perfecter. So it's more perfect, but it's still a comparative, placed in contrast to something else. Christ came as high priest of the good things to come, with the greater and more perfect tabernacle. It's just a worship tent, is all that means. A greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation. I imagine probably everybody's aware, but just in case, we'll make sure we're all on the same page. What's the better worship tent? Our founders would say, we the people, and I would agree with them. We the people. Now, that's not a statement we make about ourselves. I think it would be pretty arrogant to say such a thing. But when God says that about us, it should make us feel really special. First of all, because God doesn't say something just to butter you up. He says it because that's the way it is. And he says, you were my intention all along. This worship tent, 1,500 years ago, that is before Jesus comes, 3,500 years ago for us, it was all about you. And I know it's a people completely separated for us in a totally different part of the world, but still he thinks and he says, it was all about you. John chapter 18, keeping your spot here, you don't have to turn and read. I'll state it if that would work better for you. But John 18, verse 36, the Lord's standing before Pilate, and the Roman governor's questioning him, and he says, "What's going on here? Are you a king? What's the reason for all this uproar?" And he's trying to get to the bottom of this and find answers, and Jesus just isn't saying a whole lot in this conversation with him. So finally he says, "What's going on here? Are you a king? Do you have a kingdom?" And he says, "It is as you say." It's about as descriptive as he gets with him. Although it gives us a little bit more in verse 36. Jesus answered, I do have a kingdom, I am a king, but my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here. And whether it's kingdom, church, body, tabernacle, temple, family, household, it's all representative, flock, fold, we could go on and on, of the same concept. He's talking about the church, his people. I have one more, if you don't mind. I would really like to turn to Luke 17. Luke 17, and read Christ's own words about his kingdom and what exactly that entails, because it's different. It's totally unique. And I think this is why in the first century there was so much confusion concerning it, and quite frankly, why there remains to this day so much confusion concerning it, because it's not a kingdom like any other that you're going to find. Verse 20 of Luke 17, being asked by the Pharisees when the kingdom of God would come, he answered them, "The kingdom of God is not coming with signs to be observed." What he means by that, verse 21, nor will they say, "Look, here it is." Oh, look at the map, and you see the little political pencil boundaries? It doesn't work that way. Or there, for behold, he says, the kingdom of God is in the midst of you. Now, that's the ESV's rendition of it, and you might have an alternate reading for it. I personally prefer that alternate rendering of the kingdom of God is within you. And he's not talking about your big intestine or your spleen. He's talking about who we really are and the part of us that you can't see with these eyes. It's made up of spirits. We're actually going to have in the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 12, once we get to that point, he's talking about you have come to New Jerusalem, the heavenly country, Mount Zion, and he'll make this remark: you have come to the spirits of just men made perfect. That's of what the church is comprised. People that have been made flawless in who they really are, spirits, in every way. So as we return to Hebrews 9, and we have this thought in our heads, Christ came, in verse 11, as high priest of the good things to come, with the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is not of this creation. Where do you buy a tent like this? I hate camping out, so I don't buy a lot of them. I have bought a few in my life. They get used like once and then thrown away. That's what I do with tents, and I think that's about their value. I've seen a lot of tents in Walmart and Bass Pro, probably even some in Lowe's and other places like that. But they're all made with hands. This isn't a tent like any tent you've ever seen. Flocks, herds of animals. We've seen that, but it's not like that. We've seen kingdom. It's not like that. We've seen families. It's not like that. You see, you get the point, though? It's totally different. It's not of this creation. It's not of this world. It's heavenly in its origin. What really constitutes the church is made up of what we can't see. On the inside of one another, God can see. And the destination of the church, even though there is, in a sense, an earthly element to it, and that, here we all are, it's not where we're going to end up by the time it's all said and done. So everything's different, but there are these comparisons of the earth that we can make, including the Old Testament worship tent. Excuse me, I'm not going to take the time to do it. But coincidentally, the Bible describes this right here and that right here as a tent. 2 Corinthians, the 5th chapter. We're told a tent that one day we put off. All right? What do we do in this tent? What's our favorite thing to do? I hope it's their favorite thing to do because it's going to be a really popular event in heaven. It's actually going to be the main event in heaven. Well, when it's all said and done, it's going to be the only event in heaven. We worship God. That's what heaven is. We just worship Him in one endless, eternal day. That's all we're ever told about what happens in heaven. I think it's pretty important that we get in tune with worship while we're here. And that we learn to, even if we don't initially, that we learn to love it. Because the praise of God is what all spirits of just men and women, understood, made perfect, do in heaven endlessly. Well, if you look in verse 12, we're going to continue on. What makes this such a better arrangement? Not with the blood of goats and calves, but with His own blood, He entered the most holy place, once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. There's so much suggested comparativeness in this single statement. First of all, not with the blood of goats and calves did He enter the most holy place. The most holy place, that goes back to this, the earthly worship tent. There are two major sections in the worshipful Old Testament tent proper. Technically, there are three, the larger. There's the outer court, which is this area that you see in the temporary enclosure, going around it. And when you go through the door of the tabernacle, what's the first room you enter? Holy place. What's the second one? That's the last one, by the way. The most holy place. Now, in grammar, that's what's called not a comparative, but a what? I bet. Oh, I knew you would know. Yeah, teacher moms. No, I thought you said it. Okay, I'm sorry. Very good. It's a superlative. How much? Super. A lot, okay? It's to the x or the nth extent. It's the most that you can possibly go. A comparative is just two things. Okay, I think I like this one better. But a superlative is, this is the best. And if you have the best, you can't get any better comparative than the superlative, that. And that's what it is that we find right here, that when you enter into the most holy place, there isn't a third section because it's a contradiction of terms. You're in the superlative, the most holy of all places. Of course, there's just a little room, and it seems to be really important, and it's just inside of a tent. But it's so important that if anyone enters into it on a day they're not supposed to, the wrong person does the wrong thing, or fails to do the right thing, in terms of smoking up the place first to cloud vision, you die right on the spot. Why is that? Because you're not holy enough, and not just you, so it's not an insult to you. I'm not holy enough to enter into the most holy place. But think of the representation in this little earthly room. Bigger picture, on a grander scale, what's the most holy place that exists? And it doesn't get any better than that. The presence of God was stated representatively to dwell in the most holy place of the tabernacle. But the actual presence of God dwells in the most holy place of heaven. Jesus, being high priest, there were high priests under the old covenant. Remember, you had to be descendants of which of the 12 sons? Levi, 12 sons of Jacob, that is, to go into the holy place. You had to be high priest to go into the most holy place. But Jesus is a descendant of whom? 12 sons, Judah. Okay, so instead of being a descendant of the third son, right, if I'm not mistaken, Levi, he's a descendant of the fourth son, Judah. It doesn't work under the old covenant. And that's the whole point of what we covered in chapter 7. Well, if Jesus is a high priest, and high priests, according to the law of Moses, have to come from the tribe of Levi, Jesus doesn't come from the tribe of Levi. He comes from the tribe of Judah, and God's okay with this. That can only mean that His law has changed. That's just using some common sense reasoning right there. Jesus, not with the blood of goats and calves, this is a comparative statement, but with His own blood, He entered not the little room on earth, but the big throne room of heaven, the actual most holy place, which is what this place represented, once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. The high priest could go into this holy place under the proper parameters, including making sure it's full of smoke to cloud his vision so he doesn't fall over dead in seeing the presence of God. How often does he do that from last class? Once every 365, if you're going by the solar calendar, days in a year. He only has the right one time. Well, I say that, one day. It appears perhaps he went in 3 times on that one day. But he's only allowed to one time on that one day. Well, there's some similarity here. Jesus goes into those holy places once as well. Oh, okay. You beat me to it. I was going to ask, how often does he go there? Oh, no. He lives there. He stays there. That's how important he is, and that's how much better this arrangement is. Once for all, and this is the benefit for us, having obtained eternal, done, period, never ends, redemption. That's a purchase price. He paid a price one time, and it's good to keep us for all eternity. Verse 13, more comparisons. For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer, which is from the perfect sacrifice of an animal, sprinkling on the unclean, sanctifies, sets apart, or makes one holy. This is a ceremonial cleanliness of the body. For the purifying of the flesh. So here's the comparison being drawn. On one hand, you have the sacrificed body of a perfect animal and the blood that was shed from it being sprinkled on you because according to the laws of ceremony, your body's kind of dirty. And if you do that, then it's recognized, okay, your body's good now. Now you're clean. Now, if the body and the blood of an animal is able to do that for the body, here's the comparison, verse 14, how much more, comparative word, how much gooder, how much better shall the blood of Christ, a person who is perfect, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot, no sin of any kind, symbolized in the spotlessness of the animals, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God. So if you ask me, Derek, where is your flesh? Here. We understand that. We get that. Okay. If I ask you, where is your conscience? Now we might say, is that really though where your conscience is found? I mean, that might be what helps to, I don't know if it's produce it as much as facilitate it. It's difficult to put your finger on that, isn't it? You know, when we talk about Jesus, Hebrews 12, able to distinguish between soul, spirits, joints, and marrow, all that stuff, we can say, well, it's all right there. I'm not sure where that one stops and that one begins, though. He can tell you all of that. Not difficult for him. Cleanse your conscience, the body and the blood of a perfect human sacrifice. If the body and blood of a perfect animal helps to make your body clean, how much more, the argument is, the perfect sacrifice, the body and the blood of a human being make your insides clean. To cleanse you from dead works, to serve the living God. Verse 15, this is our memory verse. And for this reason, what reason? To make our spirits clean. For this reason, he, Jesus, is the mediator. That's a person who stands between two parties of the new covenant. A covenant is an agreement. He's the one who stands between two parties who are alienated from one another, and kind of like a reconciler, does what's needed to bring these parties into an agreement so they don't have to be at odds with one another any longer. Those two parties are A, God, and B, humanity. By means of death, hang on to that, we're going to come back to it. For the redemption, or the making up for, the paying the price for, the transgressions, those are all the going against of law, under the first covenant, that those who are called may receive the promise of the eternal inheritance. These animal sacrifices were given daily under the Old Testament. There's one that's really important, and the seventh day, Roy, I want to say, seventh month, not day. Seventh month, I want to say it's the 10th day. Does that sound familiar to you? Okay, good. I'm pretty sure. Check me on that. But Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, that's the one big one, right? And where the high priest, he gets to enter in on that single day. But why do these animal sacrifices continue to be given? Well, I give an animal sacrifice at noon because at 8 a.m., I got really mad at somebody and I hauled off and smacked them in the face, is what they deserved. Okay, probably should have handled it better, but it is what it is. That animal's gone. Yeah, and I mean, this just continues with every transgression that the people commit, and not one day a year, not once a week, every day this is going on. Why do these animals continue to be offered? Because sin hasn't been taken care of yet. Not for good. But Jesus' sacrifice as a human, and perfection at that, is different. Because his sacrifice was so good and so powerful, it wasn't just given for sins presently being committed as these animals and their sacrifices were. But his sacrifice was so powerful, it went back to erase, at least in penalty, consequence, not the fact that it happened, but in penalty and spiritual consequence for the previous 4,000 years. Every person who had trusted in God's plan to save him or her took care of every one of those person's sins. Took care of all of the people of faith at that time, presently. And would be enough to take care of every sin that to date, for roughly the last 2,000 years, people who live in faith of God's plan, even to take care of those sins. That's powerful. And unlike the Old Testament animal sacrifices that kept being offered year after year, month after month, week after week, day after day, he did it one time. And then sacrifice is permanently done. Sound a little bit better to you? Is that gooder? I think it's fair. Now, how is this accomplished? Kind of skipped over this prepositional phrase a little bit. Two of them actually found here. By means of death. Keep that in mind as we're going forward tonight. Verse 16. For where there is a testament, now we're switching over in concepts just a little bit. For where there is a testament, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. These are synonyms, but they're not the same word. What's the difference in a covenant and a testament? Covenant, I mentioned, that's an agreement between two parties. Maybe that we're at odds with one another, as in the case of God and us. What's the difference in that and a will or a testament? A creed? All right. Oh, a decree. Very good. I'm sorry. Yeah. I like that even better. Yeah. Okay, so a decree, I like it, like an edict. It's like someone in an executive position just saying, look, this is the way this is going to be. All right, that's a little more what a will is. Of course, there's more of a legal component to it as well as a future perspective with a will or testament. But that's a good way of looking at it, like a decree or an edict. What else? I'm sorry? One-sided. Very good. Very good. So a real difference with it, let's say that I have in my will that I want Kobe to receive the 28-year-old two-seater go-kart. I never had one. I always wanted one. I did have a one-seater that was a piece of junk that someone stole at my grandma's house, but yeah, fine. It's out of our hands anyway. Okay, so I want Kobe to receive my 28-year-old, at this point, two-seater go-kart. He's like, all right, man. But he doesn't have it now, right? How does that work? Well, a will is you write it while you're alive, and legally, once you die, immediately, that's Kobe's property, because I said so. Now, it could be that Kobe said, I don't want that piece of junk, and that brother would be pretty smart. But it doesn't matter in the sense of what legally he has right to. I wrote it down, and so it becomes his. Now, he can do with it whatever he wants when he gets it. But it may not have been something, hey, Dad, when you die, can I have the go-kart? It's just a one-sided thing, or at least it can be a one-sided thing. Verse 16, for where there is a testament, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator or the will giver. For a testament is in force after men are dead, since it has no power at all while the testator lives. Think about it this way. Was there ever something that Jesus taught about or gave an example for that really wasn't practiced, at least with meaning, until he died? What do you have? Oh, the Last Supper. What happened to the Last Supper, Gene? Okay, so he teaches them something. Hey, you take this. This is my body that's given for you. Take this. This is my blood that's given for you. And so they go through kind of like this example of, but it doesn't have tremendous meaning at that point, does it? When's the first time they actually observed that? I believe that was on Thursday night. Some believe it was on well, I say that. I guess it'd be more Wednesday. Many believe it's more on Thursday night. But whenever it is, it's 2-3 days after that it starts having meaning and being practiced. On the first day of the week when he rises from the dead. Well, why then? Why not before? He gave his will for that while he was alive. But it doesn't come into effect with the meaning that it's intended to carry until he actually dies. So all these teachings that Jesus is giving, now a lot of them are just moral things that you can find in the Old Testament also. However, there are a lot of things, including in the Sermon on the Mount, you have heard, and he'll quote the law of Moses or some interpretation, sometimes false interpretation of the law of Moses. But I say to you, you've had it told to you by those of old, but I say to you. And when he gets done with this huge discourse that he provides, they're like, who is this guy? We've never heard a rabbi talk like this. He's making law. He's giving it. When does his law eventually come into effect, though? At his death. Verse 18, therefore, not even the first covenant was dedicated without blood. For when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and goats with water, scarlet wool. What color is scarlet? Oh, red. Certainly a hue of red, right? Scarlet wool and hyssop, which is an herb. And I don't know if you've ever seen this in any shows from the setting being at this time, but it's kind of like a mop without a handle. And I think it's just really handy to like scatter it around, kind of fling it. Is probably the significance behind this. There may be more to it than that. When Moses has spoken every commandment to all the people according to the law, he takes the blood of the animals with water, red wool, and something that you can use as a kind of a tool to help scatter this around. And he sprinkles both the book itself, that's the law, and all the people, seemingly like combining them together, saying, this is the blood of the covenant or the agreement, which is a bringing together, which God has commanded you. Then likewise he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry. And that brings us to our memory verse for the night, 22 of Hebrews 9. Who would like to say this one for us? Go ahead, Emily. Beautiful. Let's create a series of dominoes. Emily? Beautiful. Number next. Bless you. All right. So let's go through. Very good. You too. according to the law, almost, and maybe not every single thing, there's an exception to every rule, but the rule, according to the law, everything has to be made pure by blood, and if you don't have blood being shed, there can be no makeup or no payment price for sins that have been committed. Now, I've stated this a number of times before, and I don't want to really go into great detail on it. You know this anyway, but God, as a parent, has granted his children the privilege of life. When you abuse a privilege, it's only right for a good parent to strip the privilege that was provided to the child. And those are high stakes when you're talking about the privilege of life. So God granted us the privilege of life. As children, we've abused that privilege. What does God, the good parent, have to do to be a good parent? But to strip us from the privilege of life that he's granted to us. And that's where the shedding of blood, and innocent blood, comes in. You might ask, why else? What does blood really matter? Turn to Leviticus chapter 17. Keeping your spot, of course, in Hebrews 9. Leviticus 17, and the 11th verse, the Lord speaking to Moses, for the life, verse 11, Leviticus 17, just in case anyone's still looking for it. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it for you on the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement by the life. Do you see how the connection is made? God has given us blood. That's not a right. That's a privilege that God has given us blood. What's the significance of your blood? What does that do for your body? We understand it better than in yesteryears. There you go. Vitamins, nutrients, oxygen, water. Right. Helps to filter out. It's kind of the oil, right, of your vehicle that you're driving. Very good, Justin. It's everything. You can't live without it. If someone gets a terrible cut in the road, watched a gruesome one the other day. I won't say what it was, but it was a real life story. But it was one of those where what's one of the main arteries? From that one. That one right there. That's the one. Yeah. I knew as soon as. Anyway, yeah, that one. It was. Believe it or not, it was from a dog attack. It was someone who was. I'll just go ahead and mention to you. 23-year-old college girl who's about to graduate to be a teacher. That's what she's going to school for, and she was babysitting for this family that she had recently met. She didn't know them super well. It seemed like a decent family. Usually they're kids, but they were away, and they had 3 pit bulls that she was babysitting while they were away. These dogs, they said, had even laid with her on the couch before, and they're still not really too sure what happened, if maybe she's trying to break up a couple of them fighting over food as she's giving them their food. Anyway, they turned on her, attacked her, and she was found 3 hours later, and the paramedics tried, but she was dead. Isn't that crazy? But the reason is where that blood supply was hid. I know it's a terrible story. Sorry, I'm not trying to put a damper on things. But it made me think of that you don't have that. You could be as healthy and vibrant as you want to be, but you don't have that stuff, and you don't have life. Blood isn't a right to us. It's a privilege that God has granted us. And if we abuse the life and what's fed by that life, blood, it's only right for the privilege, life, and what it takes to have it, blood, to be taken. And if it's not ours, it's got to be someone's who's innocent, because it would only be fair and just for it to be that way still. That's why verse 22, Hebrews 9, according to the law, almost all things are purified, made pure when they're defiled with blood. And without shedding of blood, there is no remission, implied remission of sins. When you've sinned, you've violated the privilege of life, and what feeds life? Blood. And that's the just connection between all of that. Verse 23 of Hebrews 9. Therefore, it was necessary. Let me make sure we're running all right. Time. Okay, we're okay. Just making sure. Time's good. Therefore, it was necessary that the copies of the things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. Anybody ever watched it's old, I'm dating myself here, Michael Keaton, the movie Multiplicity? No, okay, yeah, okay, good, all right. I'm not, it's so many years ago, it's probably not fit to be watched, to be honest with you. But it makes me think of it, there's this cloning that takes place with a human being. And to start with, the guy's just stressed out, and he's got too much going on in his life. And I can't remember how exactly the connections happened, but he's got a buddy scientist or something. Anyway, he ends up being duplicated. And number 2 is like pretty good. I mean, he's not the same thing as number 1, but it's pretty sharp. And I don't recall all the reasons for it, but somehow number 2 gets duplicated to make number 3. And number 3 is just an airhead. He's a mess. He's a liability for everybody. I think there ends up being a number 4 also. But what these are copies of the original. And as you go along, each one, it's, the copy, it gives you a pretty good idea of what the original was, but it's not quite as good. You make a photocopy of something, and you got smudges, where there's some blackness where it's supposed to be white, and it's, that'll work, usually we say. But a copy is not as good, not as valuable, not as beautiful as the original thing. And the real thing here are those things that are in the heavens, the most holy place, the holy being himself, the flawless sacrifice of Christ. Well, prior to revealing to us the original, God showed us copies of all of these things so we could have an idea of the overall picture. It's not nearly as beautiful and nowhere near as valuable as the original. It was necessary that these copies on the earth of the things. What copies? The tabernacle, the holy place, the most holy place, the outer court, the animal sacrifices, the Levitical priesthood, the high priest of the ones who they died, but they would only do a really good job, the good ones for 10 years or 20 or whatever. The original is so much better, including the sacrifices, the original sacrifice. Verse 24. For Christ has not entered the holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. You recall the whole purpose of the Levitical high priest going into the most holy place? It's on the Day of Atonement. Now, before he goes in to help out others, he has to do something for himself. He has to have his own sacrifice because he's a sinner just like all the people he's representing. And he goes in with the blood of animals, and he presents it before God, and God says, all right, we're good for a year. I mean, it's not a great arrangement, okay, but it's something that helps them to limp through with all these copies of the original. And then he goes back outside, and he gets the blood of a perfect animal again, and he goes back in, and he presents it to God, and this is on behalf of all the people. It's a good soul, kind man. Not great, but he's good. And then Jesus comes along, and he's the original. The copies were just to direct our attention to what God had in mind all along. And he says, no, the holy place isn't this little teeny tiny room on the earth and a tent that some human constructed. That's nothing. It's meaningless. It was just a cheap copy to help show you what I had planned for you all along. So the original is the actual most holy place where the presence of God is found. And Jesus, he goes in, but he skips a step. Why does he skip a step in this process? There's one less for his. He is the sacrifice, is one thing. Second thing is, he doesn't have to give a sacrifice first before giving it for the people. Yeah. He has no sins. No sacrifice needs to be made for him. You see how the original is better than the copy? And think about the irony in this. He goes in carrying his own blood that was drained out of his body. Why didn't the Old Testament sacrifices, the rams and the goats, and we didn't talk about them, but the pigeons and the turtle doves, why didn't they just flutter in carrying their own blood into the most holy place? Yeah, well, Jesus was too. Oh. But he is the life, inherently. He's the life. And you can't kill that which is life. That's a contradiction of terms. And I realize he technically goes through a death, but he doesn't cease to be. Death doesn't mean you don't exist. It means there's a separation that's happened. It was just his spirit got separated from his body for a little bit, but he's so powerful, he sends his own spirit back into his body, rises up from the grave, ascends into the most holy place, into the very presence of God. Now, I don't mean this flippantly or disrespectfully, so please don't take it that way, but I won't say that because it might sound like that. But how cool is that? How powerful is that? I think it's a better way of stating it. That you've risen from the dead, you've gone to the place that nobody ever has been or ever could go. You walk in like you own the place, carrying your own blood that spilled out of your body alive and well. That's powerful, isn't it? And he does it not for himself. He doesn't need it, but for us who so desperately crave it. Verse 25, not that he should offer himself often, comparative, as the high priest enters the most holy place every year with blood of another. He then would have had to suffer often since the foundation of the world. But now once, at the end of the ages, that doesn't mean at the end of time, of the major dispensations or ages of time. There was the time of the fathers where God communicates directly through the heads of the households. Then there's the time of Moses. He talks to his people through the mediator Moses. Then that of Jesus, he talks to his people through his own son. And the end of the ages just means there's not a fourth age to come. This isn't multiplicity. You get three and then you're done. So we're in the third and final age of the Christian dispensation. And at the end of the ages, he showed up because God had only shown his people copies up to this point to say, hey, here it is. I'm the original. All those copies. Look at them now. Can you tell how God was pointing to me through all of them? Verse 27, and as it is appointed for men to die once, just like with Jesus. By the way, that's a general rule. Don't do that. That's a general rule. There's an exception to every rule. So who are the two people of whom we know are exceptions to this rule? Never died. Elijah, and before him, it's like electronic and a knock. Enoch. Very good. All right. So Enoch, back in Genesis 5, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and Elijah, not Elisha, the first one. Because Elisha watches. Yeah, good. All right. But, just generally stated here, understood. It's appointed for men to die once. You're not going to escape this unless the Lord returns. But after this, the judgment. The point of this, we often apply it to ourselves, and that's true. That's being stated here. But the application here is Jesus. He's not going to die 1,000 times or 50 million times, even though that many sins have been committed. It doesn't operate like the Old Testament sacrificial system. He did it one time. That was good enough for everyone in the present, everyone in the past, and everyone in the future. Verse 28, so Christ was offered once to bear the sins of many. To those who eagerly wait for him, he will appear a second time, apart from sin, for salvation. Have you given much thought to the day when Jesus comes back and the scene, what it's going to be like for you, for others? Hopefully we've given more concern for ourselves. Listen to this. To those who eagerly wait for him. This shouldn't be something that keeps us up at night and gives us nightmares. This is something that ought to excite us if we truly belong to him and we trust in him and his promises. 2 Timothy 4, verse 8, Paul says, finally. And I've always liked to look at that, or I have for a long time. I'm not sure his tone in that. You can't read that a lot of times through just writing. But I like to look at that finally, not like, okay, I'm done. writing, but like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for my whole life. Isn't that a cool way of looking at that? Finally. The time of my departure is at hand. I've fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. And there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day. Not to me only, but also to all who have loved his appearing. It doesn't have to be a scary thing. But next week, 2 weeks, in chapter 10, we're going to find out how it's going to be a really scary thing for a lot of people. And it's not just people who are on the outside. Even for some on the inside, it's going to be a really scary event. How do we make sure we're prepared for that? I'll tell you how. Prepare for our next Bible class. Read the first 25 verses of Hebrews 10, and we're going to memorize, I think, verse 9. I don't know if we'll get, it's like 39 verses, we won't get through all that. I don't know if we'll make it through 25, we'll try. But let's go early on our memory verse, number 9, okay? And how can we be prepared for this great event and make sure that Jesus' return is not frightening, but it's actually a really exciting experience. Looking forward to that class together. Is there anything you'd like to share, though, before we take just a little break for our announcements, singing, and prayer? Yes, John. Oh, okay. The exception of, wasn't once, was it? I don't think so. Right, yeah. And it would seem that he probably dies a second time, wouldn't you think? Okay, it's sensible, right? How about the ones that Jesus raises too or are raised after Jesus' resurrection? I've thought about those too. Very good, John. I wasn't thinking about that. Good. Okay, thank you.